Welcome, everyone, and good morning. Thank you for joining us for Demystifying CMS Selection, a Strategic Approach. I'm your host, Jim Brophy, Group Director of Digital here at Northwoods. In the ever-changing and evolving landscape of web content management, choosing the right CMS has become increasingly complex. What used to be a straightforward set of platform and hosting options, leaving you to focus your selection process primarily on features and ease of content management, has exploded into a huge array of often confusing ones. These include DIY models like Wix and Squarespace, or CRM integrated platforms such as HubSpot, and robust SaaS platforms like Kenico and Adobe Experience Manager. As someone tasked with either leading or participating in your company's CMS selection effort, where do you begin? Well, this morning, we will present strategies to get you started on your CMS selection journey. Your trail guide this morning is Patrick Bieser, founder, CEO, and president of Northwoods. For over 25 years, Patrick has honed his software development skills by day and website UX skills by night. As the product manager of Northwood's own content management system, Titan CMS, Patrick has spent countless hours researching, evaluating, and consulting on most of the popular CMS systems available today. While a select few platforms have been around for some time, he has seen his fair share of CMS systems come and go and is ready to share tips and advice with us this morning. If you have questions during the presentation, use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions at any time, and we'll answer as many as we can during our Q&A session immediately following the presentation. Also, please feel free to use chat to connect with our team and other attendees or share real-time feedback with Patrick using the reactions button in the bottom of the toolbar. We will also address questions we receive from folks when registering for today's class. Additionally, we'll also be sending out a recording of today's webinar in the next few days, so you'll be able to rewatch it or share it with your colleagues. So, with those housekeeping items out of the way, I'm going to turn things over to Patrick.
Thank you, Jim, and welcome everybody to Demystifying CMS Selection. We have today's journey. We have about 49 slides, if you want to keep count, to get a sense for where we're at. We're going to get and take a kind of a wide swath at many topics. We're going to talk about the CMS platforms and how there's so many choices, and I understand how frustrating that can be. So I'm going to give you a checklist and a way of thinking about it. We're going to share our perspective of having done this for the last 25 years, share some myths and realities, and hopefully give you a way to answer the question that you're asking, which is, what is the CMS for me? So lots of CMS options. We break them down into 5 different types of buckets. Over on the left-hand side, we have the do-it-yourself space, which is probably got a majority between do-it-yourself and small. That's probably 60-70% of the market of websites that are out there. Do-it-yourself websites mean you are doing it yourself. You are not relying on a team. You're paying, $10 a month or so to Squarespace, and they give you a template and you fill in the blanks and you hope that they have enough stuff for you to make and meet your needs. Many of these websites are 10, 15, 20, 25 pages. I don't see too many big ones over there, even though they do exist. Oftentimes, this is very, very good for sole proprietors, small businesses, or people that don't have much to say or don't have any need to interact with stuff. Small websites kind of cross that threshold where they are now pushing a little bit more advanced, maybe 100 plus pages, etc. And between do-it-yourself and small, again, the vast majority of the websites around the planet, of which many of them are very small, not doing anything complicated. Where our particular firm, Northwoods, lives is in the medium space, medium and large. And so we are representative and we see people in the do-it-yourself in the small space, but we primarily practice in the medium area, which is the largest by volume of effort put into web. These are websites that typically take several months to half a year to build and have many, many advanced features, which we'll get into, talk about the different ways that you qualify yourself as a medium, their price tag, which I will also share what the typical price tags are for these different sites. So these are some of the practitioners. This is by no means exhaustive. If you don't see your name of whatever CMS you're using in that list right now, don't be offended. I've left about 100 of them off of this page. It's a very, very saturated market. There's lots and lots of people out there. And there's a couple of reasons for that, which we'll get into. On the far side over here, we have the large things. These are where the licensing cost typically is going to be $100,000 plus. Implementation, $500,000 to $1 million to be able to put these in place. Our particular product, Titan, also plays in this space, but these are the safe bets for very, very large corporations with very, very large and demanding content management needs, where they're tackling huge product catalogs, lots of users, lots of private secured content, and or they want to get into very advanced things like headless or personalization. Those are the places where they play. Down on the bottom left-hand corner, we have there's a very large collection of niche players. This is just a small sampling of a few of them. You have us plays in the government space. CMS plays in the school education space. Excuse me. And there's a whole bunch of different players that play in these niche markets. So legal space, medical space, we'll find CMS players that specialize in one particular kind of industry. They can be effective inside there, but they can also leave you shortchanged if you are in one of those spaces and you have needs that exceed whatever their templated solutions have. Every one of these other products over in the medium market can play in these niche markets and often do. I know we play in the school and government spaces very frequently with our Titan CMS package, but there are features that some of these packages have that we will not have. Very specific, like government, a list of a database laws or statutes that are passed by the city council. And that's something that's a specialized niche thing that only governments need. Schools don't need that. And so they build a specific database for that. Not to say you can't build those in other ways, but that's there. And then finally, the last one, which I'll just mention briefly, is some of the legacy sites that are out there. These are people that have been around a long time that also have a Me Too, often very large, very expensive, is very popular inside of corporations. Microsoft for a long time gave it away for free with an MSDN license. So if you signed up for Microsoft, you got a copy of SharePoint. And people could whip up a SharePoint website. The IT department could whip one up in a day. You could put something together, and very often those websites were absolutely awful and very, very soon consume vast amounts of resources, time, and budget. And so it's not a common use for public websites. It is still very, very popular and heavily used inside of document management and as a back end for Office 365 and other Microsoft products. So they've woven SharePoint into one of everything they do, but it's no longer kind of a standalone CMS system. People do not use it for that. It would be, in my continued opinion, be a poor use of that product. So anyways, very saturated market, lots of things. We're going to get into more detail about the specific costs and features of these different packages as we go forward over here. I also want to mention that another way of looking at this marketplace is similar to the subway map that New York City. And this is actually a CMS map put on by another vendor. I believe their name is Real Story. And they have mapped out the intersecting features and functions that all the different content management platforms have. The blue lines that intersect over here are the actual content management. That's where we mostly play. We touch some of these other lines over here, but you have digital asset management, product information management, marketing automation, customer relationship management, and some things I don't even know what they are. Operational maps and content platforms. It's a content platform is a headless CMS. And you can see that some of the very large players, Microsoft, Salesforce, Oracle, right in the middle over here, they intersect it and they provide a tool that does all of these things. But we believe that that is often a foolish choice that you should find for each one of these different niche areas that are indicated up here on the top left. You should find a specific product that specializes in and integrate those. Very often we have found when people or vendors are offering these fully integrated products where they touch every one of the buttons, they have acquired or purchased somebody else's software and then woven it into their own. And when you go from module to module, you find that the interfaces are changed, clearly built by different sets of programmers. It has all the associated bugs and challenges that go along with it. So an all-in-one solution, in our professional opinion, not recommended. Not to say people don't do it, but typically most medium-sized clients don't need all of this superpower functionality that comes with some of these platforms. If you're a huge corporation, then this might be for you. Most people are not. All right, so I'm actually curious right now, a quick chat and a chance to interact a little bit with y'all is, could you share in the chat what CMS platform you are using? And I think that'll pop up for me up on the screen. So if everybody would just type in, I'm curious as to what platforms you guys have out there. I might be able to tailor some of my presentation a little bit. Everybody find the chat button on your thing. Macola and Pipedrive, SharePoint. We got two. I'll give it a few more seconds here. Okay, well, I'll see if anybody else pops up. You can still answer if you're finding looking for the chat button that's out there. I have to admit, I have not heard of Pipedrive. I had heard of Macola. If I'm not mistaken, that's an older, it's been around for a long time. So the name rings a bell, not one that I personally interacted with. So it's always fun to see where different people are at and what they're doing. All right, so the frequently asked questions we get and have heard for 25 years now is which CMS is best? What is the easiest to use? Which one's the most extensible? Got a couple questions that came in, which is which one has the fastest load times? I'll give a quick answer to that, which is the load time is going to be extremely dependent on the implementation. Most CMSs like the Titan CMS can get a page ready in under a half a second for delivery to the web browser. For the average page takes about a half second in our system, and that's probably fairly typical. What makes it all the difference is what kind of content you're serving up, how big your images are, nothing to do with the CMS, how big the videos are, nothing to do with the CMS, how much you're pushing down all at the same time, and or to some degree, how complex you've made that page if it has to do a whole bunch of work in order to render itself. The other thing we get is an open source versus proprietary question. What is the cost of the CMS, which I'll get to. I'm going to get to proprietary and costs. And which will get my website up and running the fastest. Well, clearly Squarespace, you can be up and running in an hour, but of course the answer is going to depend upon what are you trying to do and what are your intentions for your content management. But I will say that these are the wrong questions. If you're trying to make a CMS selection and trying to pick the best package, etc., the question you should be asking are, what websites have the features that you're looking for? So if you're not happy with your current website, which is, I assume, one of the reasons you're out there looking for a new CMS, or you're not happy with the functionality of the CMS, which we occasionally hear, that they don't think it's user-friendly enough, go surfing out on the internet and find a page, find pages, websites that you admire, that you think are done well, from competitors or even people outside your industry. Find out who built it, find out what platform was used to build that website. Those are extremely indicative clues as to what's going to be a good solution. Ask how long did it take, which will give you some indication of cost. Obviously, cost is going to vary with each different vendor or proprietor inside there. But on the pure level, if you're looking for a new CMS, start by looking at websites that have the kind of functionality and features that you are looking for. And so, in fact, we get sent that have a feature checklist. It's like, do you have bolded text? Yes. Do you offer search functionality? Yes. Do you have workflow? Yes. And so we just go through these, often mind-numbing 300, 400 questions, and we just check yes all the way through. And I would forward that these RFPs and the kind of spreadsheets that help you make a CMS decisions are a waste of time. What they reveal is that most CMSs, especially in the middle market, have the same features. Checklists don't reveal the key differentiators between the CMSs. So if one particular CMS has a great way of handling content, building libraries or data imports, et cetera, typically these spreadsheets are not going to ask that kind of question. If they do, there's not a great way to answer it. So you're going to need to interview the vendors, interview the CMS things, and ask them, what are some of the key, what makes you guys better than everybody else? Also make it easy to white lie. We get asked questions, do you support advanced workflow? Well, I don't know what that means. And often in an RFP process, we don't have anybody we can talk to. And so we just say, sure, advanced workflow. I'm going to interpret that in one way. So a more honest answer would be long and laborious, of which nobody will read. So it's easy for vendors to be able to just answer yes to all the questions inside there. So in the end, to reiterate the same point I just made previously, finding a good team, the implementation team, and you're 80% of the way towards finding your good CMS. It's the implementation team, stupid, to quote James Carville back when he was talking about running a presidential campaign. It's the implementation team that's going to make all the difference. And that doesn't have to be a vendor. It could be you. It could be the team that you have in-house, but that is going to make the difference on whether you have a success with your CMS, which is, I assume, what you're going for, or it's going to be another. And as long as I'm on a rant, I'm going to talk a little bit about the CMS website comparison charts that are out there, and then we're going to get to some substance here in a second. These charts are also fairly close to useless. They might get you 2%, 3% of the way, or narrow down a list of stuff, but being able to compare just on raw criteria in a table like this is misleading at best and bad at worst, in that it can lead you down paths and set you in the wrong direction, where it says, well, look at Drupal got 5 stars. All right, what does that mean? Security. Answering a question of security, I would want to take a half an hour to have that discussion. What is it that you're trying to do? What are you trying to secure? Who's going to log in? What are their credentials? How often do they come in? There's so many questions that go into answering the security question. To put it down into one line in a chart is a disservice to you and the people that read this. So I don't give a lot of weight to these, and I don't think you should either. They're out there. So what should you do? All right, let's get to some affirmative ways to move forward. Here is the checklist that we believe is helpful to you when you are making a CMS selection. And I'm going to focus on the first column over here. This is the collection of things that you need to do before you begin your CMS search, which is, as I've alluded to already, what are the website features that you are trying to implement? And I'm going to go through those in a second. And there's a long list of features. So many things, some easy, some medium, some hard. What is of those features, do you have a design? Do you have a prototype, wireframe, some sort of indication of what you want that to look like? And it's more than just a sitemap with a list of features. Oh, we want a products page and an industries page and a people page. Well, you need to see what that looks like. Vendors need to see what that looks like. CMS people that are going to do it, whether you're going to buy it or not, they need to see that to be able to say, yeah, we can do that. That's easy, that's medium, that's hard. Each one of the things. Do you have a strategy of what you're going after? How are you going to arrange all this content? Do you have the content ready to go? Or is that going to be a heavy lift? Do you need a way to import content into your system? Do you have an inventory of all of this stuff? Who's responsible for it? Does it exist now? Does it need to be remediated? All these things are going to make the difference between a successful CMS implementation or not. Honest about your budget. Very often we have people that approach us that say, I don't know how much a CMS could cost or should cost. I'm going to share some of that with you in a second here. And so what should we spend? And then we're going to have a circular conversation for a little while as we say, well, what features do you want? Well, what features can we get? Okay. Well, we're going in circles. Then we'll start offering up. Here's a $25,000 website. Here's a $50,000 website. Here's a $100,000 website. We can show you the difference and give you a sense for what the features and functionality are of each one of those. And then you can hopefully start working towards your budget, because that's going to drive. When you do the CMS implementation, in theory, your licensing cost should be a minority part of the cost, but you need to come up with a budget of what you can do. Honesty about the skills of your staff. Again, this has nothing to do with the CMS tool itself. A great tool. We do CMS training for our Titan CMS product. We have people that come in for 6 hours of training to get their 101 basics, et cetera. That's about average, et cetera. Some people are done in 2 hours. Some people, it takes them 2 days. So we have our standard deviations of the skills of the people that are learning how to use the content management system. And their skills vary widely. And by skills, it's how quickly do they get how content goes in. Do they understand the basics of HTML? You usually don't need too much of it, but a little bit goes a long way. Understanding kind of the basics of what JavaScript and CSS do. You don't need it, but if you have an understanding, it goes a long way, especially when something isn't working quite right. It behave or animate on the way that you think it should to on the screen. You then having an understanding of how that technology is working underneath the hood will make you better at getting support, being able to ask the right questions. So a well-informed CMS user has some skills, the whole curve. So people that with no skills, all the way up to full implementation teams that are full stack developers. And we work with all of those when we do our implementations. And finally, once you get down to, this is going to have the first 5 over here, going to help you narrow down to a CMS vendor. And then at some point in time, you're going to then ask that vendor, show us what example, talk to us about how you've implemented and solved the different kinds of problems. Because as we look at the features and your strategy, your content and your budget, it's going to dictate all sorts of stuff that's going to say, are we going to recommend WordPress? Are we going to recommend Squarespace? Are we going to tell you, you guys really should go over and do this on SharePoint? So all of these things are going to dictate what sort of recommendation you get and what's going to be the right thing. All right. And then actually on the other side over here, these are the things that you need to pay attention to. So I'll talk about those as we get through. We're going to get through the first section over here. And then I'm not going to belabor the right-hand side of the screen here, but the first half is really important. So website features, we want to be able to say, what is your homepage going to look like? Is it going to be simple like Irish Fest, high art, very visual, consumer focused, meant to create a visual brand impression? Or are we going to be highly functional like Dispensary, showing their products and allowing them very quickly to move into product categories deep into their catalog? 2 completely different experiences, and what you do with how you design your homepage is going to then dictate what sort of features and functionality your CMS needs to have. What about the About Us page? Do you want a lot of information? And now we're looking at some of the design patterns. So this is the content patterns. I'm going to take this one right in the middle, the Godfrey Kahn example, where we have text left, image right, flip it with a headline in between, image right, text left in a bulleted list, etc. 3 across. We call these content stripes. These are templated parts of the content management system that allow you the flexibility to kind of put your content in and then dictate how you want it to be laid out. And you will find most website implementations revealed on these general pages that there's recurring patterns, which is a good thing. You want users to get used to how your websites present. You do not want to have a different user experience on every different page. And so seeing these patterns that you're designing and what you're aspiring to, kind of a different pattern layout, 3 across with a dark background. Once you discern what these patterns are, you can get a sense for, can the CMS do this easily? Do I have to build these out manually, or is there an automatic template that I can pull out of a library somehow and just drop onto the page? Is there a plugin in WordPress that does all of this stuff for me? The CMS vendor, in order to make a good recommendation and figure out budget and cost, needs to see these pages and see what you're trying to do. The contact us form, lots of different ways to laying it out. Do these contact us forms need to be routed to specific people inside of your organization? Does a different form, different pages have different forms with different routing? Do we want to have more advanced questions? I actually don't have one up here, but sometimes in the contact form, we're going to ask a few other product filtering or narrowing questions to answer. Tell us a little bit more about the needs that you have, what you're looking for, so we can better serve you with our answer. That gets into, does the form need to be basic, or does it need to have conditional logic, branching, yes, no questions, more of a lot of JavaScript that might be involved in there, and the CMS may or may not have built-in capabilities to do the advanced form needs that you have. And this is where the rubber meets the road in every content management website. You want calls to action. You want to engage with users. It's not just serving of information is important, but at some point in time, you want them to engage. And so you want to have a possibility of having forms that are highly engaging, that work really well. Does this form need to talk to a marketing automation system behind the scene? Is it just going to go just into send an email to the right person? So all of these are things that, again, RFP checklists don't ask, that nuances are going to come out. So these are things when you are then finding contact forms out there and you're looking at these opportunities to tell the vendor, the CMS vendor, what you're trying to do. They're going to hear functionality things. They're going to pick up on all those, make notes, hopefully in some sort of functional specification as to what this thing needs to do, and then appropriately say, can their tool do it? Do they have to build something custom, or is it something they can't do altogether? Calculators, popular, just one I found on the internet, but many different variations, from product configurators to basic calculators, all the way up to product configurators where you're making selections and filtering through and building parts on the fly. With some people actually go so far as to rendering images of the final that you calculated or configured. So that's something else. Do you aspire to have some of those? Do you have a catalog and or anything lists that have filters? 2 different product catalogs. One of our niche specialties is in the manufacturing space. So we have places where we do really complex filters. Here over here on dispense right, you can see that different ways that you could filter to find the kind of cup dispenser that you are looking for based on all the different criteria. This is called a taxonomy over here. In this case, on the CTS Corporation, the taxonomy is up on the top. And so you're able to filter. When you change the filters up on the top over here, it's going to change what's showing down on the bottom. Do you have content like this? Sometimes it's done with people. Sometimes it's done with data, just general data lists, libraries, documents. I've seen it done with research information. So anything that would be a big database that needs to be filtered and sorted so somebody can find what they're looking for. Do you have any of that? Again, showing this to a vendor, and they can say, yes, we can do that. This is easy. This is hard. This is something that's out of the box, or this is something we're going to have to custom develop. Calendars. Do you have a calendar need for events? A couple different views of that. Calendars are pretty self-explanatory, but find one that you like out there. If you have a need for a calendar, find some examples. Finders. Here's similar to a list, except it often has Google Maps or some other mapping stuff built in there. So here we're able to go and filter, find a rep in what states represent which stuff. Now we have a picture. So again, a data list that's being filtered in a way. Over here, we have Starbucks locations, data list showing pins on a map indicating the location. Do you have any of those needs? Find examples of what you're looking for in Finders. Do you have any of those? Resource library, similar to a data list or a catalog. You have the ability to take documents. In this particular case, this is an example from a research organization that publishes medical research. So not common titles, but getting the names of the authors is important over there. What you show on the right-hand side of the screen is highly variable. You could show a thumbnail. You could show dates, authors, times, revision number. Even in some cases, if you have an intranet, you might have the opportunity to put an edit button right on this screen so that people that are logged in and authenticated and are content managers to this library, authorized content managers, could click and upload a new version or fix spelling errors or fix grammatical errors in the listings that are put over here. And again, being able to sort and filter both by keywords and by different things. These are features. Does your CMS need to have this? If you do, find a picture, show us what you currently have, talk about what it doesn't have, and that will inform the CMS vendor whether they can do it, whether it's small, medium, or large. Excited. E-commerce. Do you have a need for e-commerce? Being able to add stuff to a cart. 5-star race car bodies had some very, very advanced e-commerce needs where you don't just buy one part, you had to buy entire systems. So as you're making a selection and you say, I want this hood duration for this car over here, well, there were probably 15 different choices that you had to make to figure and configure that, because they can build it lots of different ways. And all of that, as you can see over here, this was the choice of one of these, and it had all of these different parts and pieces inside there. And I'm actually, you can see it's a very long scroll over here to say what you have to do. So do you have complex e-commerce needs? People say, oh, e-commerce, it's all the same. It's not. In fact, we have the pleasure of working on e-commerce websites. And I can tell you that everybody seems to come up with some unique niche approach to how they want their e-commerce done. And unfortunately, we often don't find out the nuances of that until we've actually begun working on the project, which is normal too. I'm not criticizing, it happens. But the fact that e-commerce systems showing a picture of what you want to do is critical to the CMS selection, because you need to find out whether the CMS natively has those features. Can it ship from alternative warehouses? Can it ship hazardous materials? Can it calculate taxes in all the different states? Can it evolve variable, as you're seeing on this particular instance? Many, many, many variations of how people want to do e-commerce that are specific to their industry. It's important that the CMS vendor and or supplier know what those things are. All right, that's enough screenshots. A big list. By no means exhaustive, but it shows a very large list of the kinds of things that you could have on your website. So you're welcome. You get the recording of this video over here if this is useful to you. This would be a good starter for naming the parts and pieces that might go on to a content managed website and what then each one of those would look like. And if you're doing a good job in your CMS vendor selection, you have started with getting screenshots or some functional description of every one of these pieces, as saying, what does it need to do? What does it need to look like? How does it need to function? What it looks like can be highly variable in many different ways. You can make it blue and make it red. It doesn't, those are things that are very, very easy to change. But adding shipping from hazardous warehouses is something that's hard to change. And that's something that needs to be in a functional description. So a lot of attention over here on search. What does your search need to look like? Search is a primary navigational strategy for many, many people on your website, even today. Know that search dominates Google and Bing and get the number 1, number 2 most trafficked websites on the planet, because people are searching. When they get to your website, they look at your nav, they look at your beautiful design, they look at your features, but then, especially as they get bigger, they are more likely than not to start using the search engine that you have built into your own website. So paying attention to how do you want your search to behave and how useful is it going to be to your visitors is a critical question that you need to have answered. And showing pictures and descriptions, et cetera, and or surveying with a CMS vendor. What capabilities do you have? What are the cool things you can bring? Does it integrating is a new emerging approach to search? It does not solve, it approaches search from a different perspective, and something I'm actually not going to talk about in this workshop over here. We've been dabbling with it, seeing implementations of AI as supplemental to search, and they can be useful in niche sort of ways if well trained. So we'll leave it at that. So how do you get that feature wish list? Go surfing. I mentioned this, dream a little bit about what you want to have. Look at competitors. And another one I should have added to this list is you might actually, at this point in time, start talking to CMS vendors and say, what are some of the key differentiating features that you have in your product? Don't show me how you edit freeform pages and upload an image. Everybody can do that. Don't show me how you can put a list on the page and make it sortable. Everybody can do that. What are the key differentiators that you have in your product, Mr. CMS vendor, that we might need or what would be interesting? So that's a discovery endeavor, different than an RFP checklist. This will allow you then to start building your wish list, your feature wish list, which you're going to communicate to the client. All right. Talk about features. Talk a little bit about strategy and design, and I promise I'll go a little bit faster here. User interface and UX, UI, UX are two different terms used inside web development practitioners. The user interface is the parts that you see. The navigation is a part that you can see. You can name it, label it, utility nav up on the top, footer down on the bottom, a form on the page. These are all user interface elements. User experience is the actual design that the user feels. So how the user encounters your website is called the user experience. Great designs are felt and not seen. So if you say this page is just really easy to use, really intuitive, that is great UX. It's not good UI. The UI could have been the same all over there, but somebody was a great UX practitioner, put that together. Why am I belaboring this in CMS selection? Because it's really important when you are selecting a vendor who's going to do an implementation that they have an understanding of UX. Someone on your team needs to have this. You ignore this or belittle this or diminish this to your peril. You want your website to be successful. You want it to be engaging. You want people to get lots of conversions. You need to have good UX. Good CMS systems facilitate good UX, and or the practitioners that use that system, the vendor or the team that's doing the implementation, their skills with UX are going to make or break how well your website is going to do out there, whether people are going to like it, whether you're going to complain about it. And so this is an integral part of CMS selection in that you need to find a vendor and a product that facilitates good UX and hopefully a team that knows how to use it. So to that end, before you select a CMS, we highly recommend that you build a prototype, engage somebody, do it yourself, or engage a vendor. It doesn't have to be the same vendor that does to design what that CMS is going to look like. I'll show you some examples of prototypes in a second here. Insider secret. Vendors will say they can implement any design, but some features are easy and some are hard. So when you show them the prototype, you can dive in, and once they see it, again, if you describe stuff, you are not necessarily going to get an honest answer from a vendor. But if you show them a prototype that you can actually click on, and after you click on the filter, the screen updates automatically inside of the prototype, well, the vendor goes, now it needs to do this. And the vendor can say, oh yeah, that's easy. It's built in, which it would be with Titan. Or it's hard, that's not something we can do out of the box. Vendors can't estimate or provide you a good CMS recommendation with integrity until you show them what you want built. Show. You can't tell, you have to show them. And you have to spend a little bit of time narrating your expectations. So RFPs that arrive in our door with big checklists and a description. Our new website needs to support products and services and about us and the history of the company. And here's a checklist of it, all the features that we got off the internet about what good CMS system should have. Please fill this in and answer the question. Well, you're going to get a flawed answer from every vendor, from every CMS that does an evaluation. If you can show them what you mean by that, which is some work up front before you engage in finding the platform that is going to host that CMS, doing this upfront work will make a huge difference in finding a CMS that matches. So every feature that you have inside of your prototype has a small, medium, and large version. And costs differ very accordingly. By narrating that stuff, this prototype will go a long, long way towards helping you pick the right thing. Here's some prototypes we built recently for one of our clients. And you can see, I'm not going to show the detail of this because it's not really relevant to the conversation, but I don't know, a couple dozen and a half pages that we have built for them. Each one of these has a rendering. Many of them have clickable behaviors on them so that you can click through these prototypes and go from one page to the other, back and forth. Selected hotspots inside of the prototypes that will animate or light up or pull down menus or navs. And you can see what it does when you mouse over it. A good prototyping tool allows you to build basic website functionality. Obviously, it's not a working website, but gives you a good sense of what it's going to do it implies or directly shows the functionality that you're going to have. And so we have small pages, medium pages, and in some cases, the mobile pages. And as you click on through each one of these, you get a sense for what's going to happen as we go through. And this is a medical device company that we built all these prototypes for. So these need to be done they should be done before you make your CMS selection. You can also do something we call wireflows. This is an example of these ones on this previous page were more colorful. Here's just kind of basic functionality. So we're trying to figure out how these filters are going to work for this different client. They're a mining equipment manufacturer, very complex product line. So we had to be able to build wire flows that showed how you clicked on different stuff and how different parts of this mining equipment would be revealed as you were trying to filter and configure the particular mining belt that you were trying to build. So it's called a wire flow. And it's very useful, again, for showing a CMS vendor, here's what we need built. And now you can say, is this easy, medium, or hard? So then you might have those things over here. If you take and start with the wire frames, maybe not a lot of color. At some point in time, you can fill those in. This can happen if you're going to do the parts over here on the right-hand side, where it's more of a wire frame, less color. Then after you make the CMS selection, you can actually color it in. That's going to be something that most CMSs are going to be able to handle just fine. Being able to apply color and style to it won't be there, but the functionality is what's going to be really important, whether the CMS can do this or not. And where you need a do-it-yourself, or do you need enterprise class CMS? Finally, if you have time, this is a suggested step, is to write a website functional specification, and then you're ready for CMS vendors. If you don't have time for this, or you want the vendor to write it, that's fine. This is like a checkpoint very early in the project. If you're going to have the implementation team, might be internal team, write a description of what each one of these functional things are. Now you have a chance to document, narrate, and put this side by side with images. Oftentimes inside these documents, we will embed images of the prototypes inside there with circles and arrows pointing and showing how different things are expected to work inside of the new website. So all of this is what we call a WFS, a website functional specification. This is a recommended step, not entirely required. We do it a third of the time. Usually on bigger projects, it's going to be important. Oftentimes our prototypes are sufficient enough to be able to get a sense for what has to be built. You're also going to want to build a content inventory then. It's the next step on our little checklist over there. This is a list of the pages that you have or aspire to have. What is the current address? What is going to be the new address of that page? What is the page title? And as this spreadsheet scrolls off to the right, you're going to have meta description, keywords that are going to be emphasized, SEO. You might have identification as which department owns this or which author is in charge of this. When was the last updated? So that you can take the sheet and sort it a whole bunch of different ways. And in the end, this becomes a checklist for the implementation of the CMS. So again, this is something that can be done after you make the CMS selection, but at some point in time, having this information or showing it to the CMS vendor gives them a sense of the size and scale of what they have to tackle, and they can give you a more honest answer for implementation, cost, and time. Same thing with data, being able to put the data in, identify the source of the data, put a taxonomy in that looks clean, and identify all the taxonomy is going to drive the filters on the page. Having this data available, if you have it prior to CMS selection, fantastic. If you don't, very early on, this is going to be one of the very first things that needs to get done if you're going to be building a site with more advanced data. So these are some recommended prerequisites, etc. So we talked about the feature list, coming up with a good design, strategy, the user experience, prototypes, talking about content. Let's talk a little bit about budget. All right, small, medium, and large. And so as you look at the different types of packages that are out there, the do-it-yourself, the Squarespaces, the Wix out there, the GoDaddies out there, your total budget's going to be 1,000 to 5,000 pages. Typically, I don't know, plus or minus 100 pages. If you have some web skills, that's helpful. You're hosting $10 a month, fantastic. And oftentimes they're going to get you a little nickel and dime. They say there's no extra cost, but oftentimes there's little tiny things that you can enhance. If you want full e-commerce, you might be as much as 30, 40 bucks a month. Full e-commerce meaning their version of what you get out of the box in their locked, gated sandbox of functionality. Going to be limited to templates largely. So if you like their templates and you can alter the color and maybe move a couple things around inside their template, again, within their gated sandbox, you're going to be just fine. And this is a web team. You're not going to have a web team. Typically, you're doing this on your own and you don't have a whole lot of skills. 90% of the websites out there on the planet probably fall into this category because Squarespace and Wix and a couple of these other things, they have the hundreds, I'm sure they'd probably do 1,000 new websites a day. I did a little search before this workshop. There's 1.7 billion websites on the planet. I'm sure that Squarespace has a very sizable share of that and these very small single page stuff. And so you're going to get about us basic features down here on the bottom. Your security is going to be basic, if any. The training is going to be videos, et cetera. And if this is your budget and you have no aspirations above and beyond this, then I'm quite not sure why you're in this workshop, but this is a large section of the world. Small websites. So 6,000 to 25,500 plus pages. Having web skills is advised. If somebody on your team doing the implementation has some skills in HTML, CSS, it's going to be very helpful, especially when you're doing implementation and something doesn't work quite right. Being able to fix it yourself without having to sit around and waiting for a team member to do it is going to save you time, energy, effort, and frustration. Your design is often done with and/or builders. I'm going to talk about builders a little bit later in the workshop. So a Beaver builder, a couple other tools, et cetera, allow you, like within the WordPress environment, to kind of have a development environment that's gated. A gated development environment allows you to have a lot more flexibility of how you put parts and pieces on the page. They break pages down into small little individual elements, allow you to drag an image on, allow you to drag a box around the image, allow you to set the padding for how much space is between the image and the box, allow you to adjust the thickness of the box, allow you to float the box left or right. Each one of these things if you knew CSS or JavaScript, you'd be able to write it natively, but they put an interface on top of that, an abstraction, that allows you then to configure each one of these little elements of every little element on a page. It's called a page builder. You are halfway to being a developer if you're using a page builder. You just aren't learning the exact syntax that's being written underneath the hood every time you click one of those boxes. But page builders do allow you a fair amount of flexibility in laying out pages. But if you're going to use one, you need to have some skill, some time, some aptitude for being able to be good at this. Your web team might be somebody that helps you part-time. Maybe it's on your staff. Maybe it's a part-time vendor. And this is about 25% of the websites that are out there fall into this category. And you expand the kind of stuff you can do over there, because in some of these sites, you can feed data in. You get plugins or add-ins or maybe native features that allow data feeds. The Titan specifically, I dropped one Titan specific feature. We have a content library that shows up in our small sites where when do an implementation for a client, we will build templated chunks of pages, those recurring patterns you see on many pages, and allow them to be put in a content library to drop onto pages and configure. Saves a lot of time. Language translation is often handled by artificial intelligence. Security, you be able to have the emergence of more private pages with a little bit more nuance. A training is better. Someone's going to handhold it through it. But with small sites, when you go through upgrades, especially if you're going to do a redesign upgrade, they can be painful. I'd like to say with Titan, they're not. We have a program for doing all that. But again, I digress. In the typical piece, when you get an upgrade, et cetera, oftentimes things are going to break. And unless you have paid a vendor or somebody on your team knows how to do this, they're going to have to resolve all the little things that break. The result of which is after people go through one upgrade that was painful on a small site, they stop getting upgrades, which is most unfortunate. It's like, one time I got charged too much money for an oil change in my car, so I'm just not going to change my oil anymore. It's too expensive. I don't like it. Not doing upgrades is you can get away with it for a little while. I mean, at some point in time, it's going to come back and haunt you. Medium-sized websites, kind of the bread and butter where we practice for most of our company is in these 2,000 plus pages. Having web skills, someone on your team having web skills is important. Hosting is going to be a couple $100 a month. You're going to get a dedicated support person, and inside the design, you're going to get somebody doing a custom design. So they might work within templates, modify those templates. They might build, but typically they have a framework, parts and pieces that they work with. You show the prototypes to the vendor, to the implementation team. They then have the skills to be able to take the framework that's inside of that content management system and build it. They also have the ability to do custom development. You, on your team that you're going to be supporting, you might have probably one person at least. Maybe it's split between two, but you can have enough people that know how to manage this, because with 1,000 pages plus pages on your website, there's ongoing work that needs to be done to keep those up to date, tuned, looking at the SEO. And this is where you get into content strategy, migration, language translation allows for tuning of that. Calculators, configurators, analytics come in there. Upgrades are often included in this sort of price range. And then finally, in the large range, which we also play in, 10,000 plus pages, you're going to have 2+ people on side there. Same thing, you're going to have a custom framework. This is where headless options come in. Headless I'm not going to spend a lot of time on headless. Most people don't need it. It's really for advanced users, but it's where the CMS system doesn't really have an interface per se. It's a machine that you send content into, and it spits content back out, and then someone else, usually a developer, is in charge of formatting that, displaying it. So it becomes a machine that processes your content in and out, and it does this all in a way that without there's no interface that the vendor doesn't ship. They just send a whole set of what's called API calls that you send content in and you get answers back out and out. This is 1% of websites. So they certainly are large and get a lot of attention because we all visit this 1%, but they're out there. And this is where things go private, custom taxonomy, on and so forth. You can read this list and watch the video if it went a little too fast here. All right, dilemma. The dilemma for you in making the CMS selection is that as the complexity of the CMS system goes from Squarespace all the way up to our Adobe Experience Manager, and you have these advanced features, the complexity is increasing. They become harder to use and harder to implement, more expensive to implement, et cetera. Where you have easy to use and people want an easy to use CMS system, well, it is a paradox and a dilemma because the further you get up that chain, the products have more features, more complexity, more options. You want more flexibility. Well, along with that is going to come more difficulty in implementation. So this is a rather straight line. Some people, if you put the dots on, if a little scattered dot diagram on all of the CMS vendors over here, you'd find that all the usual suspects are going to be on the easy side. Squarespace is going to be down over here, and Sitecore is going to be up over here with how easy they are based on user feedback and what sort of skills the people have. All right, we talked about the budget. We talked about content strategy and website features. The skills you need to do a CMS implementation are in this honeycomb, like a bee's hive, where there's drones and worker bees and queens, et cetera. We have all these different roles. Everybody is an essential part of making this hive work. So you need somebody who's going to help you pick that CMS out, hopefully some executive who sponsors you internally and gets what's going on, some project manager early on who works with the steering committee and the governance group. The bigger you are, the more likely you might need a governance group to figure out, well, how are we going to make sure this CMS gets updated on a regular basis? Then you do this content strategy and digital strategy, you design it, you put some user experience together, information architecture. Hopefully the editor-in-chief is somebody that's inside your organization, but you need all of these skills, database, SEO, content. These are the skills that are required for a modern, non-trivial website. If you're in Squarespace, yeah, you don't need all this stuff. But if you're doing anything in small, medium, or large, you're going to need some variations of these skill sets. Do you have these on staff? If you do, great. If you don't, find a vendor who does and interview them and go from there. All right, I have put up, and I'll share with you, actually, I think I have it right here. Let's share it right down there. I assume everybody can see this CMS spreadsheet over here. So this is a Google sheet I put together. And so what this is, I'll share this after presentation, but this is a place where you can put it in. So I filled this in really quickly, and I know I got a couple minutes here, so we're almost done. But you can be able to put in, these are the typical questions you should be asking of a CMS vendor. How much does it cost to do design? How much for implementation? What are the hosting costs? What are the training costs? What are the services? Do you charge for each one of those? And this will give you what the first year cost is and subsequent yearly costs. And so this is how you level the playing field with the total cost of ownership for a CMS system. And again, I'll share this spreadsheet with you. You won't be able to edit it, but you'll be able to make a copy of it. And obviously you're going to modify it to your own needs, et cetera. So that's a cost calculator that gives you an honest and fair look at all the different things that are going to be required in your CMS system. All right, a couple quick myths to wind up here. Myth number one, open source is free. Yeah, it is, except in our experience, whether you're working with and talking to many clients who have used Drupal or Joomla, name your favorite open source package, WordPress. The implementation costs and the total costs of what you're going to end up at the end of the day are the same. We have a WordPress practice in-house. We have a Titan practice in-house. One is proprietary and one is open source. I can tell you that the implementation costs and the differences are no different. The amount of costs you're going to pay on a license fee is trivial compared to all the overall parts and pieces, et cetera. So unless you have the technology skills and lots of time, you're going to need help. Design, implementation, hosting, all take time and money. Your time is worth money. When you pay for complex software, you're funding the time that you're not spending. So proprietary people or open source people, somebody's getting paid, somebody's making a living. off of doing that work. Open source is safe because the code is public. Yeah, except when many people are in charge of security, no one's in charge of security. So you relies on eyeballs reading the code independently, but you can't know if this was done and continues to be done. All CMS projects often have a small core development group working on the core part of the product, which is hundreds of thousands of lines. You think everybody's auditing that stuff for security in an open source project? Think again, it's not happening. So open source projects are often flagged for actually being less safe than a proprietary system. No finger that you can point at one person when something goes wrong and it needs to be fixed fast. Finally, this is the big elephant in the room. Open source is not proprietary. I don't want a proprietary system. I don't want to be locked into one vendor. Building a website on any CMS, on any platform, is a commitment to a marriage. You are putting your hope, trust, faith, and finances into the team that is doing that implementation. Whether it's a vendor, an in-house staff, or yourself, every spouse has flaws, and divorce is seldom easy or cheap. If you need to get off of that platform, whether it's open source or proprietary, and you need to move to another one, it's not going to be easy. I wish I could tell you differently and promise you, but it's not true. It's the same as getting married. The CMS platform, it's like your new home. Once you've moved in and remodeled it, it's yours. It's unique. Moving from one house to another house. Have you ever gone into someone else's kitchen and tried to guess where they keep the silverware? Is it in that drawer right next to the sink? Or is it on the other side of the sink, etc.? I always make a little game of going into people's houses that I've never been in before and trying to figure out, where did they put their silverware? Is it logical, according to me, or not? Everybody builds their websites differently. And once you start doing implementation, especially if you're using plugins, plugins is like engaging in polygamy. You're getting married to multiple people. You have all these marriages, and every one of them, if you don't like the plugin anymore, getting rid of that plugin and going to a different one, it's another divorce, and it's not easy or cheap. And finally, the host is like your local government. You're paying for services, and you expect the police to keep an eye on things, but governments have flaws, just like hosts do. So there's no perfect host. So no matter what you do, when you build a website, you're getting married to somebody. There's a delusion that, oh, if I get married to open source, I can just switch vendors, I can switch hosts, I can move the whole thing, pick it up and move it. No, you can't. It's not true. It's a lie. It's a myth. It's not true. Open source and proprietary have the same flaws and limitations. The key is success is the team, their skills with the tool, and their prior experience building sites similar to what you are trying to build, etc. You think you have a safe choice by going with an open source or proprietary system? Here is a list of vendors who have gone out of business in the last 15 years. I don't know if you recognize any of these names, but these are people that no longer exist, of which they had great penetration. Ectron, huge. Vignette, huge. Big, expensive, all gone. These are no longer considered the safe choices. So what you do when you're getting married, is you got to pick somebody you trust. Are they going to be around? What's the longevity? A lot of subtleties in being able to have stuff. This slide's actually in the wrong spot. This is the page builders I was talking about before. Beaver Builder, Oxygen. These are some of the page builder type things. So just move on here. So we talked about CMS selection and all the things you need to do over here on the left-hand side. All these other things, we have individual workshops and seminars on talking about SEO and translation. A couple of these get lumped into multiple workshops and seminars. But if you're interested in these topics further, these are all parts that are going to make a successful website implementation, not necessarily having to do with the CMS itself. But if you want to find a good CMS, complete the stuff we talked about over here on the left-hand side and go vendor shopping. And then you have a much, much higher chance of having success. Any questions?
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate that very much. Great information as usual. We have a couple of quick questions that were submitted ahead of time. So let me go down the list here. A few I'll answer, and I'll pose a few of them to you. One of the first ones was, is WordPress on the decline? No, it's not on the decline. It is a robust system that continues to grow its market share. And as Patrick alluded to, there are pros and cons to every CMS out there, but it is still growing and still a very viable choice for people who need a CMS. The next question is, what is the best web hosting for e-commerce? I'll answer that one as well. WP Engine is by far the best hosting solution out there, including for e-commerce sites. Someone else posed that question. What's the best hosting solution for WordPress with respect to e-commerce? So the simple answer is, for any of your sites, whether it's commerce or just a regular website, WP Engine is by far the best host out there. One for you, Patrick. Which CMS has the fastest load speeds?
Yeah, I think I alluded to this a little bit in the workshop. The load speed is going to be highly dependent on the content of that page. So all things being equal, looking at that list of vendors I had up previously, most of them are going to be able to deliver up a basic page sub 1 second. And I'm going to say that they're all, if you had a horse race, it's going to be like the men's 100 in the Olympics. It's going to be the difference of 1,000th of a second. You're not going to see a discernible difference between them. How you build that content and the skills of the vendor of putting content onto the page, tuning it, optimizing it, and making sure that the actual kilobyte load, megabyte load of that page is as low as possible is going to be the single most determining factor on how fast that page will load. You can serve up pages in under a half second, most pages on average. But if you put a 10 megabyte image on that page, it's going to take 5 seconds to download. I can't do a whole lot about that other than tell you, don't do that.
Thanks, Patrick. That makes a lot of sense. All the time we have for the questions. Thank you so much for all of your time today. And before we wrap things up, I'd like to offer everyone in attendance a complimentary consultation to get any additional questions answered around CMS selection. To request a consultation, visit us at nwsdigital.com/DM and choose CMS selection from the consultation type field dropdown. We also have several upcoming webinars that we think you'll enjoy. On September 12th, we will discuss AI, the future of digital advertising is here. And October 10th, we'll present what every marketer needs to know about WordPress. As always, all webinars are complimentary and begin at 10 a.m. Central Time. You can learn more and register at learn@northwoods.com. And if you're looking for information on a specific topic or just want to stay up to date on the latest trends and developments in the constantly changing world of digital, please check out our blog, our recorded webinars, our YouTube channel, and we have a brand new vodcast that we've recently launched called Around the Campfire, featuring casual conversations with our experts on all things digital. We encourage you to check that out. And finally, if you'd like to learn more about Northwoods and the many services we offer, from website design and development to custom software and digital marketing to digital advertising and marketing strategy, visit us at nwsdigital.com to explore our services details, read client stories, and much, much more. Also, after the webinar window closes, a short survey will be available, and we'd greatly appreciate it if you could share your feedback on how we did this morning. So with that, thank you very much for your time and for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great day and a great rest of your week. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jim.